Hi, thanks for joining us this morning. I'm Graham from Blackmagic Design. We've been working really hard on some new updates for you, so we'd like to talk about those today. Plus we also have a nice upgrade for URSA customers as well, which we'll talk about later. But first, let's talk about DaVinci Resolve. When we acquired DaVinci, it was really only a color corrector. That's all it did at the time. You know, it used the advanced panel, which I have behind me here. In fact, originally DaVinci, there's the advanced panel as a slide. You know, eventually DaVinci actually didn't even have a menu bar. You couldn't use it any other way apart from through the panel. That's the interface, so I've got a slide of what the UI used to look like. It was only operated via the panel, but it's really come a long way. Obviously we've upgraded the UI, we've added mouse and keyboard support, and we released a free version. You know, it's not a cheap version, but it's actually a really very full-featured version of the software for serious work. But the big change is it now does editing. So, you know, the editing workflow has really changed how color's done. You know, it's created new workflows, and I think editing is really the biggest change that we've done to DaVinci, and because it creates a lot of new sort of ways people work, and that got us really thinking about those workflows. We really thought deeply about how people worked with Resolve now. Now the workflows have changed, so we kind of need to adapt. Of course, it's great that more people are using color correction. That was really the dream we originally had when we did, made a lot of the changes to DaVinci and really modernized it. We wanted a lot more people to be able to use color correction, and a lot of TV, most TV shows now actually have full grading on them, but a lot more sort of types of work as well. More people are using color correction in different ways. A good example of that is they're using it on set with helping lighting. I mean, they're often great on set just to really place lights. And so, obviously colorists go to production companies now to work. That was another big change that's happened. In the old days, people just worked in dedicated post-production facilities, but now they're actually getting out. They're going to production companies. Obviously, they're on set. They work in agencies. They're working in trucks. The people, we've got colorists working in stadiums. It's really quite exciting, and so we needed to really think about these workflows. How could we help those workflows? And really, the big change, as I was saying, is editing. There's a lot more people using editing now. There's a lot more people using DaVinci for editing. More people are editing now in DaVinci than actually doing color correction. So it's a huge change. And editing has created some new workflows. There's really 3 new workflows that we have to think about. And one is obviously the dedicated workflow, but then there's people switching between stations, and then there's people simultaneously doing editing and color correction. So that's, it's changed things a lot. The dedicated color correction suite, of course, people using the advanced panel. It's traditionally DaVinci's, well, that's everything DaVinci did. That's where DaVinci's legacy, if you will. But a lot of other people are switching editing station between editing and color correction, and so that's something that we have to think about. And also, some people are simultaneously editing and color correcting at the same time. They're literally clip by clip doing that. So the dedicated suites have the advanced panel. It's a really big panel. It's got tons of controls. It just does everything. And the major post-production facilities use the DaVinci Resolve Advanced panel. They know they know it well. It's great quality, but the new workflows can't really use it because it's too big. So this is where we need to think about what we're doing. So we've designed some new control panels specifically for these new types of workflows. These sort of almost editing-based workflows. One of the control panels is designed for people switching between editing and color correction. A few hours of each one, for example. The other workflows where people are actually doing color correction and editing simultaneously. So before we go on, I thought it might be worth just giving a bit more of a background of kind of how we were thinking about, to design some new control panels, it meant we needed to think a little bit deeper about what we're really doing. And so what we did is, we sort of like, well, we thought quite deeply about it. We didn't want to just sort of create what was already there. So, I mean, a good place to start, of course, is why do you actually need a control panel? I mean, why can't you just use, color correction through the user interface with a mouse and keyboard? I mean, you can do that, of course, and you can use the mouse and keyboard, but why do you need a color correction panel for color correction? And I think the real reason is, unlike editing, you do need a panel. I mean, color corrections are unique. Also, when I'm talking about color correction here, I'm not just talking about, just colorizing the image. I'm talking about, all the feature set and sort of all the creativity that, DaVinci has in the whole tool set. But when it's got so many tools, DaVinci, and it does a lot of stuff, but you really do need a panel. And the reason for that is when you're doing editing, which a lot of people know obviously very well, you're actually moving clips in the user interface. And so that's a different metaphor to what happens when you're doing color correction. When you're doing color correction, you actually need to look at the picture. You're adjusting multiple controls at once, but also you're reaching into the picture and kind of holding the emotion of the shot. And that's what colour correction is all about. It's very different, and it's actually quite hard. It's horrible looking at the user interface for colour because you've got to constantly move your focus up to the picture and then down to the user interface. That makes it very difficult to use. It's horrible adjusting one user interface setting at a time. You can do it, but it's very slow, and it's quite difficult. So I think it's almost impossible to do good quality colour correction with a mouse and keyboard. It's very tough. You just don't get the speed and precision. And so it really does mean that you need a control panel to do it properly. But there's also another issue that was interesting for us. Obviously developing the Cintel film scanner, we had a really affordable, good quality film scanner on the market, and it's sort of the newest film scanner. In some ways when we introduced the Cintel film scanner, it's Thunderbolt and it's low cost, it's very small as well. I mean, you could even wall mount it. What that meant was that we kind of almost reintroduced a good news story about film, and we had a lot of people coming up to us at trade shows. I mean, I'd often stand next to the Cintel scanner at trade shows, and they'd tell us they wanted to shoot new film, which I was a bit surprised about because we kind of thought that mostly the Cintel scanner was about film, rescanning old film, particularly for HD and Ultra HD masters from old content, almost reinvigorating millions of hours of content that's out there. So we wanted to know, why did they really want to shoot film? And they said, well, they wanted film looks. And the thing that was a question for us is why can't they get film looks with digital film? And I think one of the issues is a bit of a loss of focus in some ways on the primary colour correction part of DaVinci. People, we feel that maybe they spend a bit too much time on special effects and not enough time in the sort of subtle art of colour correction, the actual look of the image. Now you can do film looks with DaVinci Resolve, and most of it's in the primaries to do that. It's very possible to create all kinds of film looks and different types of film stocks to reproduce those, and different eras of film as well. But we felt that maybe people need to spend more time in the primary colour corrector. So we felt like we needed to do something to really enhance the creativity behind the sort of subtle differences in film styles and looks. And really in some ways we had to work on ways of actually enhancing the primary colour corrector. Now this has only really been possible on the big advanced panel. The big guys have been able to do this. And if you see obviously feature films, you can see the sort of work they do. It's beautiful. I mean, it looks wonderful. But we wanted to see if this is a creative problem we could solve. So it wasn't just about doing some workflow solutions, but also we wanted to kind of have a great creative challenge to solve as well. And we think this is an area we can do some big differences to. Also, I've seen a lot of colorists over time. I've spent hours in colour correction suites to, sometimes overly annoying colorists, but I just love the creativity behind colour correction. It's so immediate, the things that people do. And one thing I've sort of noticed after spending a lot of time with colorists is that new colorists tend to be a little extreme. Now, sometimes you need extreme looks. People push things and it looks great, but often I see new colorists do that quite a bit. I think experienced colorists have really mastered the more subtle control over the way things look. And the differences between different types of film stock is actually very subtle and needs a very fine grading finesse to the colour grading to do it. I think as people get more experienced, they kind of, they become more obsessed with that subtlety, and sometimes you don't even really see it, but you feel what that looks like. So we felt that if people could spend more time in the primary correction area of DaVinci, it would actually really in some ways help the creativity behind how things look. And in fact, that's the whole point. What could people do if they spent more time there? So it's another thing that we thought deeply about, and we wanted to really kind of help people come up through colour correction and understand and sort of almost discover the subtlety that can be done with looks. And obviously another big issue that we were thinking about deeply is quality. We realised we really need to focus heavily on quality. There's already a lot of cheap plastic control panels around. It's great that those control panels are out there. They've introduced a lot of people to colour correction, and I think that's obviously the spirit behind what we've done with DaVinci. It helps people get into colour really easily, but they're not quite designed. Often they're designed to be cheap more than to solve workflow problems. So, none of our workflows that we're really thinking about here are about cheap. You've got colorists who could be doing hours of work on these. I think when you're working on a control panel for hours and for years at a time, you need quality, and a few more dollars I think is definitely worth it over the years of use. So just because they're smaller panels in some ways doesn't mean to say they're not professional. The world's best colorists need to use them. You've got a great top-notch colorist who comes in to help an editor. They don't want to be using something that's cheap. They want to be using some really the same feel, the same quality. They expect the same quality, the same feel. They expect the controls to be laid out exactly the same way as the large advanced panel they normally use on the dedicated grading suites. They don't really want to change how they operate between the control panels. So another actually thing that also is probably worth discussing as well is portable workflows. Now, even the big control panels are essentially portable. You know, we've got major feature film customers who use the advanced panel on set. I mean, they literally take this giant panel out, put it in a truck or a marquee, and they have it actually on set when they're doing major feature films. So in many ways, the thinking that we had was that any workflow can be portable. Portability is not the actual main workflow that we're trying to solve here. It's these kind of editing-based workflows in many ways that we had to think about. So we thought that to get the design right, and yeah, we're very free when we're creating a new design to sort of do it any way we like. We felt that the focus to get the design right, really the deep thought that we had was in some ways centered around what people were doing, not kind of where they were doing it. You know, obviously these panels are more portable, so anything that's smaller is obviously more portable, but we felt it was really what people were doing that was really more important. So we've got 2 new control panels we're doing today, and first I'd like to look at the workflow centered around simultaneous editing and color workflow. You know, this needs a small panel, it's placed next to the keyboard, it's only then can you edit and color correct at the same time by sort of reaching above and below. So what I'd like to do first is introduce the new DaVinci Resolve micro panel. I've got a slide of it here, and you can see it's a wonderful die-cast aluminium design. It's not plastic. That makes it a little bit more heavier, but the more weight makes it stable, and it's obviously very strong. It's a very small size, but it's not too heavy to carry. You don't operate it while you're carrying it, so it doesn't really have to be super light. What matters more is it's actually very stable and very strong when you're using it. It doesn't flex around everywhere. The sides are machined aluminum. Now it's powered via USB, so it means you can use a laptop battery because when you plug it into the laptop, it'll power from the laptop. It's USB-C, so it's a modern design because everything, obviously computers are moving to USB-C, but we do include a USB 3 to USB-C cable with it. Now it's plug and play. The drivers are actually included in DaVinci. You don't really want to be upgrading the software in DaVinci when you're doing a job. So the idea is if you've got a job that you've got on, freelancing, come and just plug in. It doesn't require any software updates. The DaVinci software itself will actually take care of it. So what I'll do is I've got a USB-C cable here that's plugged into a laptop that's just off screen. Now it's a bit hard to see because it's off screen, but it's actually one of the new MacBook Pro 15-inch models. It's got a HDMI out, so you'll be able to see the UI. But what I'll do is I'll plug in the USB-C, and now you'll see the panel backlighting will come on. And then now that's all you have to do. I mean, I've just essentially walk up to a DaVinci system and plug in. Now you can see the UI. I've got up some clips here. There's John Brawling, one of the clips. Now all I need to do is you can see there's 3 trackballs in the front of the panel for lift, gamma, gain, or shadows, mids, and highlights, depending on the terminology you like to use. Now I can color grade. So I've got some scopes. I'm using this upside down, so this is a bit strange, but you can see I've got some control there, and I'll add a bit of gamma. I'm not a colorist. So you can see it works very normally. I can move to the next clip, previous clip. So these really large trackballs have got a quality feel about them. They're the same design as the advanced panel, which is obviously very important because they're a very high quality trackball in the advanced panel. But we custom designed these trackballs. They've got an extremely smooth movement. They're just super lightweight. And above them, we've got reset buttons for the RGB, the YRGB, or to level the channels. DaVinci's a YRGB corrector, so you do the RGB bounce with the ball in the panel, and then the ring does the gain. But you've also got obviously some Y channel adjustments as well. Now, as I was saying, these trackballs are the same design as the advanced panel, but we have made them a little bit smaller to make the panel thinner. So they're almost the same size, not quite. They're a little bit smaller so that the panel can be thinner, because obviously the bigger the trackball makes the panel thicker. Now, there's 3 buttons above the trackballs, and these are used for, well, actually the 3 buttons here I'll talk about first because these are better. Now we've got a log and offset button there, and they changed the trackballs to log or offset grading. A lot of people love working in log or offset grading, and if you turn them both off, then it's the standard primary color corrector. And there's now another button that I really like, and it helps definitely when you're using a laptop or say an all-in-one computer, is the viewer button. Now if you go to the UI shot, you can see what happens when I push it. Now if I push the viewer button, you can see it changes the UI and flips it over to a full screen view. And now as I'm adjusting, I can be color grading on the shot there. And if I need to use one of the color correction tools, I can just switch back to the UI by pushing that button. Makes it super handy to just be able to move between like almost a full screen broadcast monitor look and back to the UI with all the features in it. you really do want to actually use most of the color corrector through this control panel. So you tend not to want to have to go into the UI very much with a mouse and keyboard. The more you can do on the panel, the better. And that's what's really driven this panel in a lot of ways. You can see it's a bit different to what small panels normally have because there's a lot of other things. Now, if you're looking on the top, you can see there's a whole row of knobs. Now, these are extremely high precision. There's 4,096 tacks per rotation of these knobs. They're a custom knob that we've designed to be able to give you, extremely fine control. Generally, you can't get that on, we actually can't get that on an off-the-shelf knob. So these are the same knob design that we have on the advanced panels, and it gives us extremely fine control. You can turn them really quickly to move it more, but you can also do extremely fine control. All the knobs have a push-button reset, so when you push them down, they reset just like the advanced panel. They're actually the same design as the advanced panel, a little bit smaller. So I think it's very exciting. You can sort of experiment with looks. If you don't like what's happening, you just push it, resets that one parameter. But what it also means, if you look at the way the panel's laid out and the way the controls are, colorists can move between the panels. The three knobs on the left and right-hand side are actually the same as the three knobs that are vertical on the side of the advanced panel. There's Y channel knobs for the lift, gamma, and gain over here, and there's a hue, saturation, and luminous mix on the other side. So it means that the reset buttons, the track balls, and these knobs here are all in exactly the same spots as the advanced panel, so people can move backwards and forwards between the different control panels. Now, another thing that's really important, this is this creativity angle we talked about, is these top rows of knobs. This is where we really worked very hard to allow not only, obviously a smaller compact control panel that works great, with a keyboard in front of it, and you can be sort of reaching over to do, editing and color correction, so it solves that workflow problem. But this creativity angle, we really wanted to boost this creativity side to what DaVinci can possibly do. Now, each one of these knobs adjusts a powerful feature in the primary color corrector. A lot of these features people don't know about. They're in there. A lot of the really advanced guys know about them because they've got them on the large panels. But they're extremely powerful controls, and especially a lot of people starting out don't know they're there. And I think my feeling is that these are the knobs that will actually transform creativity for a lot of people. Now, I'm not a colorist, so I'm going to have a bit of a go at showing you what we've got here. Now, obviously, the simple ones are the ones that we already have on the big panel, which is the Y lift, Y gamma, and Y gain. Now, Y lift is great for adjusting the black point. It doesn't affect sort of saturation or anything. You've got a Y channel control because DaVinci is a Y RGB corrector, which means you've actually got separate Y channel controls, which is extremely powerful. You can adjust the Y lift to sort of move the black point around without really changing the balance or any of the color side of it. The gamma control, again, it adjusts mid-tone contrast. The Y gain control adjusts the brighter parts of the image in the Y channel only. I actually quite like this control because it makes the whites pop. If we pop down into the control panel here, and I can go into John's face here and I can adjust that, you can see it really kind of makes the whites pop out a bit and makes the images a little bit more angelic. It sort of adds a bit of depth to the images. So it's quite nice. So then, of course, if we keep going along, these are the new knobs. I mean, obviously, the advanced colorists have had the controls on the side, but along the middle here, we've got some new controls. Now, there's a contrast control. Again, it's a very popular feature in the primary color corrector. Now, increases or decreases the difference between the darkest and lightest parts of the image. It's actually very similar to adjusting lift and gain controls simultaneously in opposite directions, but it does it with one control. And I can show you, if we go back to there, I can show you adjusting contrast. I'll back it off a little bit and you can see it tims it down. And then next to it is a pivot control. Now, pivot and contrast actually work together. Contrast sort of stretches the image, but pivot works out where in the image it is. So it actually changes the center point of where the contrast control works. So if I move that around, I'll have a bit of contrast in there and you can see it moves up. So I could actually move the contrast up to the whites a little bit and kind of create it, starting to make it a little bit sort of, not blown out, a little bit blown out in the whites. So the pivot control and the contrast controls work together. Now, mid-tone detail is another control I've got next here, and this is a very powerful control. Another control I really love, I love having access to this because it's another one of these controls I didn't really know about until we acquired DaVinci years ago, and then I started to really understand some of the things it could do. Now, when you turn it up, it actually increases the contrast of regions of the image with high edge detail. So it kind of like increases definition. But when you lower it, it does sort of the opposite, but in a different way. It basically softens the area of areas of the image that have got detail are softened. Areas of the image that have got little detail are softened, but high detail areas are kind of left alone. So what that means is if it works really well on faces. I mean, it's a very popular control as a kind of a repair tool for actors and actresses to sort of soften off facial features. And I could have a quick look. If you go down to it, and I can show you on John's face here. If I back it off, well, I'm actually increasing it up. So you can see it starts to sort of create a bit of edginess on the face. But if I go the other way, and you can see that was resetting it. Now I'm going down a bit, and you can see I'm going to go way too far here. But you see it's really softening off the facial features. So it's a really kind of a nice, interesting creative control. I'll be really interested to see what people do with it, with all kinds of different material. With the control on there, it makes it easy to use. Now another control, again, that I misunderstood when I first saw that control is color boost. Now what it does is it raises the saturation of areas of low saturation, and it's sort of, sometimes people call it vibrance, but it leaves the high saturated areas alone. So it's really different to the saturation control, which just increases color. What it does, it looks much more natural than the saturation control. So I could show you here. I think that it might work. Again, I said I'm not a colorist, but if I wind it up, you can see I'm adding a bit of color to John's face, but I'm not really. And the back wall's got a little bit. It's a cream color back wall, so it's coming in a bit. But his shirt really isn't doing too much because it's already got a lot of color in it. So it's actually really can create some wonderful looks of things where you want to add a bit more color, but do it in a much more natural way. Now we've also got the shadow and highlights controls here. Now the shadow basically it sort of selectively lightens or darkens the shadow detail. It leaves the midtones alone, so you can really increase the sort of detail near the blacks without really changing the image too much. And the same thing with the highlight control. Like a good example, if we go back to the control, what I'll do is I'll run up, and I'm using the control panel upside down here, but I'll run up the gain a bit, and I'll sort of get the point where it's starting to get a bit hot on John's face here. But if I use the highlight control, you can see I'm probably using it the wrong way here because I'm upside down, but you can see as I control it back, it's now kind of pulling the highlight back a bit. So it's great for like recovering detail from when shots have been a little bit overexposed and it's kind of blown out the highlights. You can kind of pull it back, I'll reset some of these knobs here by pushing them so I can bring it back to natural. Also, there's a reset button here you can push, and that resets the complete grade. And that looks a bit dark, so I'll bring it up with my trackballs. It's great. It's annoying using it upside down, but it's a fun thing to use. I can't wait to spend more time on these control panels at home. It's like everything when we do a new product, you've got to hide it, so I don't get much chance to use them until now. So now that leaves us with the other three knobs, which the advanced panel has. This is a saturation control, which is very simple, just increases and decreases saturation. We've got hue control, so if we go back to the color correction, you can see the saturation just brings up all the color, and then the hue control kind of, if you want to get psychedelic, you can use it, or repairing stuff that's a bit wrong. Hue works basically the same as an old television. And then we have a loom mix control, which is really a blend between the YRGB and the RGB correctors in the switcher. It allows a blend between the two, which is particularly important. Some features, some correction features work in the RGB domain, some work in the YRGB domain. You have an ability to kind of blend between them. So there's a lot of creative power in these controls, and we really hope that a lot more people will discover the creativity that these controls have. I think that because they're there, people can try them anytime with all kinds of different kinds of work. So I think that's a huge creative angle that we've got with these new control panels. Now, looking at some of the new other features of the control panel, we've got these direct action buttons on the right-hand side here. Right-hand side, my left-hand side, your right-hand side. What we've done here is transport controls. There's next clip shots. You can move through. A lot of people, when they're color grading, they just move through the shots really quickly. They don't need to play each shot. So we've got next clip for previous clip, next frame, previous frame, next node, and other things like that, loop and reset. There's a reset button. So they all do something when you press them immediately. So you don't need to go to the user interface to do very common tasks. So I think when for example, I've seen people grade extremely fast when they're using the next clip buttons, and obviously the bypass button lets you bypass the grades. You can quickly compare grades. You can quickly disable or turn off on and off nodes. And all the buttons are backlit, so if you're using them in a dark environment, it's pretty nice. So the price of the DaVinci Resolve micro panel is going to be $995. Now it requires DaVinci Resolve 12.5.5, which is going to be available today. And the DaVinci Resolve micro panel is also available today. Next we've got the DaVinci Resolve mini panel. Now, I'll show that to you. There it is there on the slide. Now it's a larger panel design. It's got all the features of the smaller panel, and I'll put it here. But it includes a lot more power. It's got full menus on an LCD, and this is the one that's designed for workstations that switch. You could be doing hours of editing on an editing station, but then you need to do a few hours of grading. And this is the one that's easy. It's easy to move in and out because it's obviously a lot smaller. So it's easy to move between workstations. But at the same time, it gives you all the controls you need. And we've had a few beta tester professional colorists, and this is the one they really like. They said that this is the one they'd use for their freelance work, and so it's also fantastic for that. It's ideal for different grading suites in larger facilities. Like if, for example, you might have a major, a main suite with the advanced panel and a couple of other smaller ones. You could even use this. Now it's also a rack width design. That means you can put it on a slide out a shelf and a rack, like in location cars, and it'll be not too wide to fit in there. It also, obviously, it looks good on a desktop. And also underneath, we've got some tie-down bolts. There's actually 2 bolts. So if you wanted to bolt it down onto a shelf, so it doesn't come off the shelf, or even if you were doing it in an education institution, for example, and you were worried about theft, there's actually 2 tie bolts on the bottom that let you attach it to a desk. And because there's rubber feet underneath, the tie bolts actually slide out of the chassis to then clamp on, so you don't like warp the panel. What I might do is I might show you the rear of it. It's a little bit different, if you can see it there on the close-up. You can see it's got an AC input, and it's also got a 4-pin broadcast power supply. So it powers from the AC outlet or a location battery supply. It also connects via USB, but it's got Ethernet as well. It's got a loop-through Ethernet, so you can also connect it via Ethernet, but it's got USB-C. Now, the Ethernet's actually got power on Ethernet, so the panel will power from an Ethernet connection if the switch supports power on Ethernet. I'll turn it round on here. So that gives it a lot of flexibility when you're in a larger facility. Now, it doesn't power over USB like the small panel does, but some USB-C devices, and USB-C is a little new, so it doesn't work on some things, but some devices will power when the panel's plugged into AC. It'll actually power the computer from the panel, which is really nice because it keeps the computer operating from the panel and charged up. Now, USB-C is modern, so again, this one also includes a USB 3 to USB-C cable. And it also, the USB is plug and play. You do the Ethernet through the menus because you obviously got to do a connection. But again, DaVinci's got the software included in it, so it just plugs in. In fact, to show that, I've got an AC cable here which I'll plug in, and the panel will power up. And then I've got the USB-C connection, which is plugged into the same DaVinci laptop that we had a moment ago. And you can see the panel comes up. It's found DaVinci, and it's come up with the primary color corrector. Now, you can see that there's a few things that are a little different. You can see all the menus here. Now on the left-hand side here, this is the area that you change the menu. So you've got primary correctors, and you've also got a page display, so you can move between pages of menus. Some of the features in DaVinci got a lot of menus. So you can select primary qualifiers, you can select windows, menus, curve grading, resizing, all kinds of stuff. If I go down to resize there, you see the resize menus. Now I could do a resize. So if I wanted to go, say, zoom, and if we go to the well, actually let's rotate because I'm using the panel upside down. I couldn't see it, but in fact I'll push the knob and it'll go straight again. Now I can zoom in, and so you see that. And if I hit the same viewer button, it'll go full screen, and now I can adjust it. So you can see it's really, really nice. And it's just all the menus, and so all the menu settings are on the side here. And if you've got more features, you can page through them with these buttons here. So you go directly to the menus here from the front panel. That's obviously designed to let you run the entire DaVinci from the grading panel. There's a lot of features in these menus here, and the knobs offer precision color adjustments of all the parameters, and there's soft buttons as well. So you can run DaVinci from the panel just like the advanced panel can. And so you get a lot of precision and speed, and you've got time to experiment because there's just such an extended feature set in here. Now the buttons on the right-hand side, they're more of these direct action buttons. Things like add serial, parallel node. You can step through stills, you can step through keyframes, copy and paste nodes, copy and paste grades, node grades. So it's definitely worth checking out the website to really get a rundown on how this works. So it's pretty exciting. And so obviously, if you look at these 2 panels and really the workflows that they solve, here's a good example of the, on the slide I've got here, of the sort of, this is an editing station that's been switched across to doing color grading. So it's pretty exciting. And of course, here's another great workflow example of having the small panel using with a laptop on set. So it's really, obviously we get to solve all these workflow problems. It's a wonderful a range of panels. I think we're pretty happy to have them. Now the DaVinci Resolve mini panel will be $2,995. It's also requires DaVinci Resolve 12.5.5, but that's available today. That's what we're actually running here on the system. And it's also the DaVinci Resolve mini panel is available now. So we think both these panels are going to be a dramatic improvement to sort of portability, creativity, and also these workflow issues. They increase the quality and value for money. I think they make combined editing and color correction workflows really easy. They help enhance creativity with access to all those primary controls, and they're more portable, so you can take them grading on location much easier than before. So that'll be very exciting to see what people do with it. Now, another thing we want to talk about before we finish up with DaVinci is we're also announcing today that we've got DaVinci Resolve's now available on Linux as a software download. Now previously you had to install the entire system, big OS and all the DaVinci application on these large systems. But this DaVinci download is just a software download that works on CentOS and Red Hat Enterprise 6.8 and 7.3. You can just download it as an app and install it. Obviously you've got to know a bit about Linux to do that. But it allows very fast systems because on Linux you can have up to 8 GPUs and large chassis PCs with lots of slots in them. So you can really pimp the machines out with a lot of power. You can basically plug in a lot of gaming cards and some fast disks for incredible performance. Now the Linux version supports these new control panels via USB only at the moment. Obviously on Mac and Windows it's Ethernet and USB, but the Linux version's on USB only. It's almost like a beta release in some ways on Linux. But we think that it'll really help increase real-time performance, and especially when you're doing really heavy resolutions and effects. So we think the Linux version of DaVinci is going to be really, really nice for people. So that's all we have for DaVinci. Now I wanted to sort of talk about cameras. And just before we get into that, I thought I wanted to recap sort of, in some ways where we are, where we started with cameras. Our original camera design was in some ways more about doing a camera for color correction. At the time, not enough work was really color corrected. We thought there could have been a lot more work that had benefited from color correction. And it's nice in hindsight a few years later to see all the wonderful work people are doing. But really that was the goal at the time. You almost had the film industry and high-end TV commercials and then everything else. So we really felt that a lot more work could be done, could take the advantage of color correction. And that was really our original goal. And things have moved on along since then. We've done a lot of work, but the free DaVinci Resolve was really for that purpose, to just get people to sort of almost get into it. But it wasn't actually enough. The issue we had is we couldn't pull enough detail out of video. Video cameras clip the below black and the above whites. And so what we found is that video cameras were very limited in the range that you had, and it meant that it was very difficult to get really a lot out of them. Also, video cameras couldn't do RAW recording or even ProRes. So we felt that higher quality file formats and more standard file formats were really a big issue too. So in some ways, we couldn't really do great color correction with video. Video just looked like video. So we kind of wanted to bring film looks to everything. So DaVinci Resolve really needs digital film to get the best out of it. Digital film creates a much wider range between the shadows and the highlights. It's also, digital film cameras are generally higher resolution than the television standards. So digital film cameras capture a lot more of the scene. You just grab more of the scene and bring it back with you. So digital film is what we really want to use when we're color correcting, because it's what makes film look like film. And you see it nowadays, it's used a lot more. And obviously, of course, great photography and lighting matter a lot too. But really, to get the best out of color correction, you need that wide range. So the issue we had at the time is digital film cameras were very expensive. They needed expensive cinema lenses. They had strange file formats sometimes. So that was the big thing that kicked us off initially. It made digital film cameras rare, so that was really hard to get the benefits of color correction, and that was really the problem that we were trying to solve. Color correction, as I said before, is like adding the emotion track to imagery. The video and audio tracks are kind of like the video and audio tracks, but the color is almost the emotion track. And so our cameras, in some ways, when we got into those, were designed about allowing sort of the use of color correction work, and really allow a lot more color correction to be used to get those sort of digital film images in and then get the best advantage of them. That's why our cameras were designed to be wide dynamic range for the best color correction. We almost focused 100% on wide dynamic range, almost over everything else. We also used things like photo lenses, so got people going with great quality lenses and affordably. They could use lenses they already had. And also we used open file formats like ProRes and Cinema DNG RAW. But obviously, in some ways, we limited the camera features to make them really tough. When you do a fairly low-cost digital film camera, that obviously education industries and things like that are going to pick them up. It's a great place to even train people. Sure, you can use them on high-end work, and we design them for high-end work, but also you've got a lot of people that are getting into the industry and getting into these workflows that are going to be using them too. So we focused on making them very tough. I remember that quadcopter where it basically crashed and the camera was fine. So we made extremely tough cameras, and we did a lot of the work on the LCD. But we felt like the time has come to sort of create a new camera design with kind of a new perspective and really sort of think about a broader thoughts about the whole process. And it's not just about digital film. So today we're going to be introducing a new camera. It's called URSA Mini Pro. And here's a slide from it. You can see it's a bit different to our other cameras. And we've got a nice upgrade for our original URSA customers here. But I'll talk a bit more about that at the end of the press conference. So let's move this panel out of the way. Now the new camera is more than just a wide dynamic range camera. URSA Mini is a wide dynamic range camera, and so it already does that. So we were free in some ways to design a new camera with pretty much everything everybody wanted, pretty much all the feedback that people had asked us about. So I've got URSA Mini Pro here, and you can see it's pretty packed with features. It's obviously very small. It's a digital film camera. It's got all the features and controls of a broadcast camera, and in many ways it's 3 cameras in one. It's a digital film camera, but it's also a broadcast camera and a studio camera. Like the URSA Mini, it's a true digital film camera with 15 stops of dynamic range, but it also has got the features and controls on the side as a broadcast camera. And you can switch to video mode, so it essentially works like a broadcast camera. But also it's got camera control through the SDI, and it does talkback tally, and tally, and so you can use it as a studio camera as well. So what we might do is check out the features of URSA Mini Pro. So obviously it's a miniaturized, it's a small design, it's magnesium, so it's lightweight, and it's tough. And, it's got, it's able to handle the kind of extremely intense cooling requirements for a wide dynamic range sensor, where you've got to cool down the sensor and refrigerate it essentially. Now it's still got the great 4.6K sensor with 15 stops of dynamic range. It gets up to 60 frames per second in 4.6K RAW. It supports recording to both C-Fast cards and SD cards. We've got 2 types of media in the camera now. It records the high-quality 12-bit log RAW, or easily managed, ProRes files in 10-bit. Now it handles a wide range of file formats. So it does obviously Cinema DNG RAW at 4.6K, but it does ProRes 4444XQ, ProRes 4444, ProRes 422HQ, ProRes 422, ProRes 422LT, and ProRes 422 Proxy, all in 4.6K or Ultra HD or HD resolutions. So you can actually record these, video, even the video ProRes formats in 4.6K, and switch it to Ultra HD or even HD, and it'll even down-res and record to HD, which is great if you're recording onto SD cards. Now you can record log for digital cinema gamma or regular video gamma. It's got broadcast camera ergonomics. A lot of the way it works is in a very broadcast way. Now the broadcast guys use cameras for hours a day, so the broadcast guys really know where to place the controls for sort of best use. They really work their cameras. If digital film's not needed, then you can obviously, it's a great video camera, but it's, because it's got a lot of video features too, but it's a combination digital film camera and, sort of almost broadcast with broadcast camera features. So it's a bit different than what we've done before. Now, some of the other features we've got, and if we look at the front over here, you can see we've actually got an interchangeable lens mount. You can swap the lens mount. So it comes standard with EF, and I can take the lens cap off here. It comes standard with EF, so it works with Canon lenses or Canon compatible lenses. But then you can add an optional PL or B4 or even a Nikon mount, which will have, the Nikon mount will be available in the future. I'll be able to show you that as well. So it's extremely flexible. So what this is actually lower cost and more flexible than doing it the way we've done it before. The PL mount itself is half the price of the dedicated PL mount camera that the URSA Mini that's PL costs $500 more than the EF version of the camera. This camera with the lens, the PL lens mount is actually half that price difference. So it's great. And not only that, the PL mount we have for this camera does lens communication. So it handles the Cook lens data. The lens data is saved into the file and that can be used to remove lens distortion in DaVinci. So you actually get communication with the lens, which is a huge improvement. The B format allows broadcast lenses. It's HD windowed, so you can put on they're actually quite affordable on second hand, but you can get a broadcast lens and plug it in. And the Nikon lens mount is mechanical, so it actually makes the lens feel a bit like a film lens, and that'll be available in mid-year, so I'll talk about that in a little bit. Now the interchangeable lens mount means that the EF camera actually has the broadcast lens connector on the front there, you can see on the front. So what that means is you can use some of those nice new EF lenses that have actually got that connection for controlling the lens. Now it's also one of the other things it's got 3 built-in ND filters. Now if I could actually show you that. So if you look through the front there, I don't know if you can see down through there, you can actually see as I change the, the knob here, you can see the filters, and there's, so you don't need to carry separate ND filters. So it's great for bright conditions, it stops flare, the ND filters are also very high quality. So you can set it to obviously 0 with no ND filter, and there's literally no filter at all in there, or 2, 4, and 6 stops. They're designed to match the color imagery of the camera. So there's no strange color shifts, and they're controlled from the knob on the front, so it's very easy to use. There's 4 positions. Position 1 is the one that removes the filter completely. They've got a very flat optical response. They handle IR very well. What that means is you don't get any IR light pollution coming into the camera. and also allows you to separately adjust shutter angle and iris even when you've got really bright conditions, because you can stop it down, so it's nice. Now the stops are printed on the side of the camera. You can see the ND filters there, but also they're displayed on the LCD. And in the menus, you can actually change the ND filter display on the LCD, so you can have filter number or the amount of stops or a fraction. So it's up to you, depending which way you like to deal with ND filters. Now going back to the front, you can see we've got an auto white balance button on the front there, if you can see that, just down there. Now on the LCD, you can actually set the white balance to different color temperatures, but you can also set it to auto, and you can align the white balance manually off a white card. That's great when you really want to just accurately set white balance to whatever the lighting conditions of the room are. However, what this button does, when you do it through the LCD, it's a two-step process. What this button does, it does it both at once. So when you push the button, it automatically turns the camera into custom white balance mode and also sets the white balance in one press. So you just have to put a white card in front, push the button, and it'll do the whole operation in one go at any time, because it's obviously a button on the front. Another thing that's worth mentioning is the microphones on the front of and the audio inputs. The whole sound front end has been upgraded. It's lower noise. It's Ursa Mini already had very good audio, but we're now even lower noise. We've got wider and flatter frequency response as well. Now, if I go around to the side, where you can see some of the ergonomics and some of the features. In many ways, when you're using a viewfinder, you're kind of using the camera blind. A lot of the controls have been designed around blind use in many ways. You can't see the controls. You need to feel them. So the camera essentially can be used by feel. Each control is actually designed to feel differently. So there's switches for ISO, shutter, and white balance, and you can feel those. There's a click wheel on the side. So down the bottom here, you've got the three switches. There's a click wheel on the side here. And what that lets you do is change menu settings by feel as well, and they come up in the heads-up display on the front video. Now there's also an analog adjustment for the iris headphones and speaker, and how that works is on the side here is you can slide that control up and down, and so the switch is what sets the function. Then you can adjust it manually. So for example, if I switch that to iris, you can adjust that knob up and down. It'll actually manually open and close the iris just from the knob. And of course, if you set the switch to speaker, it'll make the sound louder and softer. And there's a speaker on the side. If you notice, the speaker's actually here. So it's on the side of the camera, so it's louder now. And also it's right near your ear when you're using a viewfinder, so you can really hear playback easy. There's also, if you look underneath the side, there's some function buttons. You can customize those in the LCD, set the buttons to what you like. It could be peaking, turning on and off, or whatever you like. You can set that. Now, another button you'll see down there, which is just over the side here, is the button called HFR. What that does, it's a high frame rate button. It sets the camera to the high speed setting. So you can set that in the menu. You can set what you want the high speed to be. Like, for example, I normally shoot 24 frames a second, but I have the high speed set to 60. So what that means, if something happens, like if something, I want to catch some action, I push that button and the camera immediately switches to the 60 frame a second setting. I can record it. Like imagine if you had a punch up at the front of a courthouse or some crazy, thing that happens when you're shooting. You really want to capture the motion of the action. So that high frame rate button is really useful for that. And obviously down the bottom below that, we've got a really big red record button you can see on the bottom there. And there's also a record status indicator, which is red when it's recording and green when it's playing. Now, one other thing that's interesting is the power switch on the top is mechanical now. So when you flick it, it just turns the camera on and off, just here. Now, the great thing about that, of course, is that when you flip the switch on, you know the camera's on. So on the Ursa Mini, you've got to push the power button, and the camera will then power up. It powers up pretty fast, but often you've got to kind of wait for the camera to power up. With the power switch, you can flick it and throw the camera on your shoulder, knowing it's going to come on. There's actually also a backup power button control. Redundancy is very important, which I'll talk about in a minute, but there's actually a backup way to turn the camera on. If that switch ever became damaged or got covered by an accessory, you can actually even turn the camera on with another way. Now, down the side here, we've got some operator controls. There's an LCD. Now, if you look at the side, the LCD is black and white, which is a little bit retro, but there is a real smart reason why we did it. A black and white LCD is really easy to read. It actually works better in bright light. So when you're out in extremely bright light, it's extremely easy. It's very easy to see what's on there. There's also a backlight button just below it, so you can turn on the backlighting when you're using it at night. And so what the LCD has is record time code, external time code, and generator time code. Ursa Mini Pro also has a more stable time code generator, so when you lock it, it'll stay locked for a long time. But a lot of people asked us about, they wanted to see external timecode. So that LCD has external timecode on it. It's also got other features like audio meters, ISO, white balance, f-stop, shutter angle, and battery level, and even the frame rate and the media status. So that's pretty nice. And just up above it, you see there's a channel switch near the speaker that sets which channels 1 and 2 or 3 and 4. And also, you'll see there's a lock switch, which stops any accidental changes. There's actually 2 lock switches. There's a lock switch here for the items at the front, and there's another lock switch down here for the items at the back. So you can, it stops you from accidentally changing your controls on the side when using the camera. Now there's also a still frame button you can see there, and that'll grab still frames. Now that's not actually supported in the release of software that comes with the camera initially, because it's, we need more beta testers for a function like that. So the channel 3 and 4 recording, this channel does 4 channels, camera does 4 channels of audio, but channels 3 and 4 recording and the still button are something we really need a wide range of beta testers for. So we'll add that in a software update as soon as we can after the camera ships, so that we can really get a chance to test those functions properly. Those 2 features change the way the camera writes to media, so you really want to be very careful when we make changes there that we have a lot of beta testers. And without the camera being released yet, it's hard to get enough beta testers to test that properly. Now there's also some buttons there for timecode, hold, timecode reset. There's also a button for auto iris and auto focus, which is also directly from the URSA Mini. So you can set, when you push that button, it'll automatically iris, set the iris or focus the camera. Now there's also a PGM button there, which is the program button. When you select that, the LCD and the viewfinder will now show what's on the SDI input of the camera. It's momentary, so when you push it, it comes on. But if you double press it, it'll lock to the external program constantly. So sometimes if you want to watch what the switch is doing, you can double press it and just sit there watching it, or you can have a quick glance at what a switch is doing. But that's really used for live production. Now I wanted to take a moment before I continue to talk about redundancy. Redundancy is very important to us. I actually spend a bit of time. My wife is from Indonesia, and she lives in a remote location, or family lives in a remote location. So I often spend a lot of time sort of in the jungle, so to speak, or up, really going to the most remote locations I can in Indonesia, and everything you point the camera at just looks beautiful. I mean, my wife says, oh, I've grown up with this, it's not that interesting. But I just think it looks amazing. I mean, there's rice paddies and mountains and just incredible stuff. And, everything you point the camera just looks amazing and beautiful, and the textures and everything come out. It's so exciting. But the problem is I'm always worried that what happens if I'm up in the middle of nowhere and something goes wrong with the camera. So, the previous URSA Mini was all designed about toughness and strength. But on this camera, because we've got a lot of controls on it, we want to make sure we deal with, have very good redundancy. So the camera has a lot of redundancy built in. All the controls on it, everything you see here can be overridden on the LCD. Obviously it's a strong camera, it's not plastic, it's metal. But even the power switch has redundant control if it gets damaged. There's 2 buttons internally. If I open up the door here, there's 2 buttons internally. If you push those 2 buttons, it'll turn the camera on, even if the power switch up here is turned off. Now, if you look at, say, a feature like the ISO, you can adjust that in the LCD menu, and you can also adjust it through the quick wheel and also the switch. So if you look on the side here, ISO can be adjusted on this menu knob. It can be adjusted on the switch here and also through the LCD. So there's 3 different ways to adjust ISO, and that's just one example. Same with white balance, right? You can adjust it, on the switch through the LCD. It's amazing. Like the iris example, you can do it on the knob here, manually opening and closing it, but you can also use the forward and left stand buttons like the URSA Mini can do to step it open and close. So, and also of course on the LCD as well. So there's 3 different ways of doing iris. The media slots, for example, there's 2 slots per media type. So you've got essentially redundancy on the media slot if something goes wrong there. And even the lens mount can be, the lens mount can be changed. So even if you had a damaged lens mount or if it became worn out over heavy use, you could just buy another lens mount and replace it. So we've really done everything we can to make sure you can keep working. Even when things get, these cameras are going out in a pretty wild world, and we want to make sure that, you keep going. So what I might do is just add a lens. So I've got another URSA Mini here, so I'll put that one there. I'll grab this guy. So here's one that's got a battery plate and a viewfinder on it. And what I'll do is I'll grab a battery. It's quite easy to obviously set up. And I'll put a lens on. And I'll turn the camera on. That's all there is to it. So now you'll see that it gets some controls on the LCD. I can go around here and It's a new camera, so I've got a piece of plastic on the screen. Should have taken that off before we got the press conference. So you can see there's the screen. Now I can adjust the iris on the knob here. So you can see, if you look at the screen, you can see that it's getting darker on the side. But also I can do it through the settings here. You can see if you look at the screen, I can pull on the filters. You can see that it's stopping down. It's all almost dark there. So you can see it's pretty cool. And I can adjust ISO on the side with the switches. So, it's pretty simple to use. It's all there, and plus I can also set settings on the LCD as well. Actually, while I've got the door open, I'll let you guys look in there. So you can see there's a 4-inch colour LCD. It's a little bit smaller than the URSA Mini Pro, but it's still quite big. Now the camera runs Blackmagic Camera OS 4.0, so it's running the same new operating system that URSA Mini runs, and they're pretty in sync actually as well. The LCD has a heads-up display with all the camera status information on there. You can see if I turn it around a little bit, you can see it there. I don't know what I've got pointed at here. And you can see there's audio meters and histogram, and also the ND filter indicators there as well. So if I bring that on, you can see the ND filter indicator comes up. All the camera settings, of course, can be changed there, just like URSA Mini can. Also, the LCD is how you load 3D LUTs and save presets, so you can do all that through the LCD. Now, the media slots over the side here, there's the two CFast cards. Now, you can see there's 2 slots between them, and that's where the SD cards go. Now, the SD cards can be regular SD cards or the faster UHS 2 cards. SD cards are really good for when you're recording HD. So, for example, you could put a lens on. Not everyone needs to use Ultra HD, of course. Most work's done in HD. So, SD cards are fantastic for very low cost for recording HD work. But if you use UHS 2 cards or CFast cards, then you can do things like faster frame rates and Ultra HD, 4.6K, RAW recordings. But the great thing about SD cards is it makes a great broadcast camera for HD work, as HD lenses are low cost. Record to the SD cards, and SD cards are very common. Now there's a switch up here. You can see there's a little switch there that switches between SD cards and CFast cards. So you can have them all loaded if you want, and depending which state the switch is whether it's using the CFast cards or the SD cards. Now both of those cards have 2 slots for recording, which means that as when one card fills up, you can change the cards. So what that means is if you're doing a really important interview or something where you really don't want to be stopping the camera, when one card fills up, it just goes to the next card and you can swap out the card that's full. But there's actually 4 slots in total because you've got 2 slots for CFast and 2 slots for SD. So that actually makes it even more redundant because you've now got 4 media slots in total. Now inside there, we've also got a few audio switches for the type of audio input you've got. There's also phantom power switches for the XLR connectors that are on the top here. So that's pretty nice. Now if you look around the back, we can go around the back view. We've got the battery plate on here. Now if I look at this camera, you can see that you can mount whatever battery plate you like, whether it's a V-Lock or gold mount. But there's also some connectors, which I'll bring around on this camera here, swing it around here. You can see we've got connectors for headphones. There's also, those headphones support iPhone style headsets, which means they actually work with the microphone. If you're doing talkback with a studio camera, you can use it for that. But generally just plug headphones in. There's also connectors for 12G SDI program in and the main, obviously, camera program out. The 12G SDI input supports talkback and tally and remote control. Obviously, there's a LANC connector there as well. There's a reference input, just like URSA Mini, but it doubles as a timecode input. It does both, which is like URSA Mini does. So if you plug a timecode input in, it'll read timecode. If you plug a reference in, it'll reference to the reference. There's also a standard 4-pin broadcast power input, which is obviously compatible with broadcast power supplies and location battery packs. Now around the side here, we've got the rosette still for mounting the camera directly on a rig. You don't need sort of a gimbal mount. You can actually sort of attach it to anything that supports the standard rosette. There's also another LAN control on the front, which it comes with that side handle that has the record button and the iris and function focus buttons on it. That comes with the camera. And there's obviously the separate SDI out on the front, which is for the, we've got it plugged into the viewfinder here. The good thing about the viewfinder controls, and something we really wanted to do on these cameras, and we've done it with URSA Mini as well, is they're regular connectors, so they're standard, they're open standard essentially. So if you're not using a viewfinder, you can use external monitors or whatever you like. They're not a strange custom connector. And even that power output is a standard broadcast connector for power. And then around the front there, you've got the broadcast lens connector for plugging in professional lenses. Now that supports both analog and digital lens control. and it powers the lens. It is in